3 days later, I finally get him to open up. And his version of the events are slightly different. So he says, I said, what time did you wake up? And he goes, around 1. And again, same time as I woke up. So we have a little digital clock in the middle on the desk between our beds. And I said, well, what did you see? And he says, the only thing I saw was a being crouching on your chest, basically crouched down on your chest. He wasn't sure what it was doing, but when the being noticed that my brother noticed him, it looked at him with red eyes, angry red eyes, and he described it as a giant bat, like a gargoyle, like a reptilian entity. He says that after a little while, it actually spread its wings and flew off.
Welcome back. I'm here today with Mack. Mack, welcome.
Hey, Sean, thank you for having me on. Appreciate it.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. I think we now have someone who is now a mutual, which would be Mary Rodwell. So, and I watched the hypnotic regression that she did for you. So, but that's literally all the research I did. I think I watched that episode, which is, I think there's plenty in there. But why don't we just start out, just brief background about yourself, and then when you started having experiences.
Yeah, sure. So my moniker Parsi X basically refers to my heritage. So I am Persian origin, bunch of Iranians that moved 3,000 years ago from Iran to India, from the province of Pars. They're called Parsis. So I belong to a very small minority of Persians. They practice a religion called Zoroastrianism. There's
Ahura Mazda and Ahriman,
duality. And that comes into my experiences as well. And so we grew up in Mumbai, India. My dad was a Navy man, me and my twin brother. And growing up in India, we didn't have exposure to a lot of Western culture till, I would say, probably early 90s when MTV turned up. So how it started for both me and my twin. So we had this really powerful experience the first time around. And the date was 12th April 1991 at 9:15 p.m. And the reason why I know the time is because it's when we lodged the illustration of the craft that we saw. So I was sitting in my room, and never in my life have I heard a sound as deep as this hum. So it was like a wall, wall, wall hum. And I'm 11 years old, my head's in girls and, playing with my He-Man toys. I was listening to my Alice in Chains because that was the first Western band that I got into, and Dirt was playing, and I was like, it's really awesome. And then I'm like, so we lived in a building that was 5 stories. We were on the 3rd floor. So it was like 2 layers of a cake. So if you can imagine, our apartment was just a straight line, and adjacent to the apartment was a wraparound balcony, which made up, it was technically the roof of the building, and then they had 3 more stories on top of it. So I'm in my room and I hear this, and then I decide to go outside on my balcony, and all I see in the night sky is this really weird egg-shaped, like an American football-shaped craft. Now, the reason why I know it's that shape is because there's lights on the perimeter, and they're going around in a pattern. So it's green, blue, and yellow. Those are the lights that I remember. So I'm seeing this thing, and I'm thinking in my mind, what am I seeing? Am I actually dreaming? Like, it was a very shocking experience to have witnessed this craft. Now, how high was the craft? So my building was 5 stories, 5 or 6. This is like 30 plus years ago. Building opposite me was 2 stories higher, so maybe about 7 or 9 stories. And it was right above that, so probably about 10 stories high. And the area we lived in was it's called an open colony, like a Parsi colony. It's just buildings everywhere, and we had a little garden around there that we used to play as kids. And I'm looking at this thing, and I'm like, how come nobody else is seeing this? It's just like time slowed down, and the craft was just stuck up in the sky. And then the weirdest thing happens is every time I mention this is that in the middle of the craft, a yellow window or a portal opened up, and it was yellow in color. And a 3-fingered hand, a really pudgy hand, like 3 fingers, black fingers, came out and started waving.
When the United States and China clash, the world will never be the same, especially when forces beyond reality threaten to intervene. What if the United States went to war with the People's Republic of China? How would these rivals fight for supremacy on land, sea, air, and across the stochastic streams of time? What wonder weapons would be unleashed? What horrors would emerge from the irradiated sludge of the South China Sea? What heroes would rise and forever change the course of history? Tread into the deepest and darkest dimensions of the multiverse, gaze through a kaleidoscope of fractured realities, and bear witness to the disturbing visions of World War III from today's greatest minds in science fiction, fantasy, and horror. Weird World War, China. Available now from Baen Books at baen.com.
So when someone or something's waving at you, you wave back. So I started waving at this. I don't know what I'm seeing. Then it slowly started moving from my line of sight towards my right-hand side. And I said, wow, if this thing's moving that way, I'm going to run out on the wraparound balcony and see if I can catch it there. So I run outside on the wraparound balcony. And as soon as I run outside and I turn left to go towards the edge of the balcony, what shocks me is not that the craft is up in the sky, but it's my own twin brother who's experiencing the same thing. And he's standing there frozen with his hand waving at the thing. So I go up to him and I say, hey, do you see that thing? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, what do you see? I'm like, do you see that hand waving at us? And he's like, yeah. So we started waving together. And I got an artist from Sweden called Olaf Rockner to illustrate the incident, which I've sent you as well. So you'll see the two twin brothers and the big craft in the sky. And then so when that happened, we were just buzzing. We're like, what the hell did we just see? This craft is literally up there. It's humming, it's buzzing. We can see the lights. And then it just flies off and disappears into the clouds.
What was happening to the rest of the town? Was it just frozen or?
Yeah, it was very quiet. Like I didn't hear any other people down where we were living, and it's a pretty popular.
Was this night or day?
Nighttime, 9:15 p.m.
Oh, that's right. You said that. And this is in Mumbai?
Yeah.
Okay. Just wanted to reiterate. Okay.
And remember, like we didn't have any references to UFOs or aliens, and for me, I remember seeing stuff on MTV, like references to UFOs and aliens. We never really thought of that stuff. So then we ran inside and we told our mom, and we're like, hey, Mom, we saw something in the sky. People call it like a UFO. So now this is 91. We have no Facebook, no social media, no digital cameras, nothing to pull out, and take a picture. So it was all in the mind. And my mom's like, okay. In her wisdom, she's like, you go in one room, you go in the other room, draw what you saw. We didn't discuss anything, me and my brother. So we go in separate rooms and we're drawing like crazy. I'm the first one to go. So my illustration's on the top. When you show it to my mom, she's looking at it and I can look at her face and she's like, oh, okay. Looks like something. But then when my brother gives his illustration is when I see that look on her face and her eyes kind of pop out. And that's when I realize she knows that we've seen something. We've had a shared experience, and the illustrations are 99% the same shape of the craft, the same yellow window in the middle, the same three-fingered hand. And when I think of what this being could have been inside the craft, and this is again just speculation, is one of those tridactyl beings that they found in Peru, the three-fingered hand being. So I have kind of connected the dots, and this is all speculation because who knows what the answers are. So that was my first experience with the phenomenon, shared experience with my twin brother.
I have a weird fact for you. I'm just confirming it right now because, I don't want to always trust AI, but I just want to confirm. Okay. All right, so that's not okay. So what AI is telling me, and it could be that there's two different dates here, but of course I can't find it now. So this was April 12th, right?
12th April 1991, 9:15 p.m.
Okay, I'm just going to try it again one more time. But I asked kind of what happened on that date.
Yeah.
And I got an interesting response. So I'm going to ask people to confirm it in post-production because I don't 100% trust AI yet. But let's see if it gives me the same answer.
You're killing me with suspense.
Oh, there's more stuff that came up.
Oh.
Okay. So it was the end of the Gulf War. So that's not when the I think the military operations formally ended on February 28th, but on April 12th, the United Nations officially established a ceasefire that marked the end of the Gulf War, which began on January 17th, 1991. So then there was the Space Shuttle Atlantis launch. It was carrying the Compton Gamma Ray Observatory, one of NASA's great observatories, into orbit. This observatory helped astronomers study gamma ray sources and was a major achievement in space-based astronomy. There were many countries in Eastern Europe and the former Soviet Union were undergoing major political transitions. I don't think there was any key thing that happened. And then Hurricane Andrew was like, there's a formation of that. So atmospheric conditions that would eventually lead to the formation of Hurricane Andrew, one of the most destructive hurricanes in U.S. history, began to form in the Atlantic in the spring of 1991. Anyway, I have to check the UN ceasefire, but let's see. Let me just double check. When did the UN ceasefire for the first Gulf War happen? Yeah. Let's see. Okay, so on April 11th, the chairman of the UN Security Council handed a letter declaring the ceasefire to the Iraqi ambassador to the United Nations. So there was a bunch of... On February 28th, Iraq finally announced its exception of the 12 UN Security Council. Okay, so there were a number of different dates, but one of them kind of fell on this date. You just have to be very careful with AI because you never know. You never know when it's going to hallucinate on you. Like I catch it in math errors routinely, right? So you got to be careful. Anyway. Okay, so that started this. What happens after that? Sorry for letting me to monopolize that much time.
Well, look, after that, for I would say about 3 or 4 months, I would be drawn out on the wraparound balcony after dinner, usually about 7, 8 p.m. when the sun goes down, and I would just walk the length of the balcony.
To advertise on Through a Glass Darkly, email throughaglassdarkly@gmail.com.
I wouldn't know why I was walking the length. And then I started looking to my left on the horizon, and I could see always 2 bright golden stars. And I was thinking, are they following me? Because every time I'm walking, they're walking with me. So then one day after 3 months, I turned around to face them.
By the way, which direction were they? West or east?
Just trying to think. That's a very good question.
Notice I didn't say north or south.
No, it wasn't. Okay, so it would probably be, so if I wake up it would be the west. But I'll have to double check that.
This is when you woke up or when you went to sleep?
No, so when I wake up, I know the sun is on the left-hand side. So this was on the right-hand side. So I know it's the west.
Okay, so at night, basically around sunset, you would see the 2.
Yeah, after sunset. So it would be just around dusk. And it would be really bright golden, what we call now orbs, is what I'm, again, speculating. So they would move with me.
So just tactically, from like a even I see birds do it too. Like when hawks will dive, they'll usually have the sun at their back, right? Because it's just hard to see them. It's hard to see them coming. So
this was not even like, if you look at stars, the stars are up, but this was in my line of sight. And the weird,
it's where the sun's setting, right? So they would have the sun at their back in order to obscure their. Again, it's just intelligent entities do this sort of thing, even birds.
So then I turned around and I just had this urge to ask them with my voice. I said, so there's 2 of them right here. And I said, if you can hear me, can you move right? So this thing intelligently moves right. And I was like, wow, what just happened? The other one's stationary. And then I asked the one on the left, I said, if you can hear me, can you move left? And then it moves left. And then I tried a thought experiment. So I closed my eyes and I imagined both of them crossing each other diagonally. And as soon as I opened my eyes, they crossed each other. So that freaked me out. And I was like, I have no idea what this is. This is like some voodoo crap. I'm going to stop engaging with whatever this was. So this was around 11 years old. Then I got obsessed with stargazing with my friends. So we would sit around in our garden, like, you're supposed to be focused on girls when you're teenagers and stuff. But for the next 2 years, we would just sit around looking up at the stars, and we would see things moving around, and that would freak him out because I would be like, okay, I know something's coming. And then he stopped talking to me because he was freaked out by this. So after that, we moved to New Zealand in my teens. Nothing really happened in my teens. The only thing I remember is vaguely having sleep paralysis, where I would wake up and I would see a very tall being with wispy hair, big gray eyes, just kind of crouching down, looking at me. That's all I remember. Then we moved to Australia. So we jumped around quite a bit, and we moved to a place called the Gold Coast in Queensland. My parents had bought a house there, and the house was being rented by a rabbi. Explain why. So the day that we were taking over the house, moving in, my mom said, go get the keys from this guy. So I go get the keys, and I remember him. He was like with his cap and his curly sideburns, and his wife was dressed very traditionally, like almost like an Amish dress, holding a baby. Didn't think anything of it. We moved into the place, and then I would say in about the early 2000s, so me and my brother were always sleeping in the same room. I had my first spirit experience. So 1 a.m, I wake up, and I've sent you that rough illustration as well with the spirits by my bed. So I wake up, and the physical sensation I got was like someone in my personal space. Like if you were, like I always say, if you're on public transport and someone's right in your face and you're like, back away. So I got that sensation. I was like, what the hell am I experiencing? So I opened my eyes, and at the edge of my bed, I saw a golden aura of 3 people standing, and it was very detailed. It was the rabbi, and I could see his sideburns. I could see his hat cap. I could see the lady standing with the baby in her hand, all 3 of them at the end of my bed. And I was freaking out. And growing up in this Zoroastrian religion, my parents are religious. They're not fanatically religious, but I was never into religion or God or anything. I never believed in any of that stuff. But then I started praying. I was like, oh my God, I think I'm seeing spirits. Maybe they passed. Maybe they just came back to the place they were, living. This went on for about 15 minutes. Close my eyes, open my eyes, and I see them. And my brother was sleeping right next to me in the room. And at that time, in my early 20s, I was going through a really rough time. Went through some, I would say, just difficult people, bad people in my life, bad influences. And I used to be in a depressive state, so I had this crushing sensation always around here. And I never knew what that was. So I told my mom the next day, I'm like, Mom, this thing happened. I think I've seen spirits for the first time. And my mom's like, okay, well, quite possibly you would have asked your brother if he saw anything. So I asked my brother, and I'm like, come on, man, tell me, did you see anything? Did you see anything? And he was freaked out, and he didn't want to say anything. 3 days later, I finally get him to open up, and his version of the events are slightly different. So he says, I said, what time did you wake up? And he goes, around 1. And again, same time as I woke up. So we have a little digital clock in the middle on the desk between our beds. And I said, well, what did you see? And he says, the only thing I saw was a being crouching on your chest, basically crouched down on your chest. He wasn't sure what it was doing, but when the being noticed that my brother noticed him, it looked at him with red eyes, angry red eyes, and he described it as a giant bat, like a gargoyle, like a reptilian entity. He says that after a little while, it actually spread its wings and flew off. It was some kind of interdimensional entity, perhaps, feeding on my energy. I'm not sure, but this is something that he could see. So then after that, we kind of put 2 and 2 together, and we speculated that perhaps the people that were at the edge of my bed were kind of protecting me from whatever this thing was, or, looking out for me. So that was my first experience with spirits, or, the spirit realm. So that was in my early 20s. In my 30s, I moved to Canada to be with my wife. I was in Vancouver for about 10 years. Nothing really happened, and I was just focused on life, Heard about the Greys, and I heard about the Reptilians from like David Icke, but I never really gave it much thought. Moved back to Australia, and then this all started again just after COVID. So in COVID time, I had no work. So I put on about 150 kilos eating McDonald's every day, getting depressed, sitting at home. So about 300 pounds. And
in how much time did you do that? In 1 year?
So I think I was putting on the weight year on year. So, but I think from COVID to when I had my surgery, so 2020 to 2022, I put on another 30 kilos just eating junk food. I used to have like 2 McDonald's combos a day, tell my wife I'm going for grocery shopping and just cry my eyes out in the car. Then I decided I'd do something about this, and I went for a bariatric surgery, where they kind of make your stomach small. And almost immediately after the surgery, like my weight loss was just rapid. I've ended up losing about 70 kilos. So I've gone from 150 to about 70 something. As I started losing the weight, I started experiencing weird physical sensations. First one was a pressure in this area, in the third eye region. Wasn't sure what to make of it. I thought, is it some kind of a medical condition, reaction to the surgery? I got myself checked. I was perfectly normal. Second symptom of starting to lose this physical weight was I would feel energy in my hands, like my hands haven't stopped buzzing since then. It's just like an electric energy. And then one day I casually look up at my hands and I can see golden aura around them, like the energetic body, the auric field. So I started seeing that. I started having time dilation, which is basically time, the perception of time slowing down for me. So I would be going to work in the city in Melbourne. One day I was getting off the tram, waiting to cross the road, and I'm just looking at the people crossing the road, and my vision goes from normal to like them just slowing down. And I'm rubbing my eyes. Am I high or something? I don't know what's going on. What are these symptoms that I'm going through? So I went on this Project Avalon forum that belongs to Bill Ryan. Bill Ryan and Carrie Cassidy, they started that Project Camelot website years ago. Reached out to people and I said, I'm having this symptoms. And someone said, oh, you know what? Oh, it's quite common. You're going through a Kundalini awakening. And I'm like, what the hell does a Kundalini awakening mean? And they go, it's a spiritual awakening. So then I started thinking to myself, okay, so I'm losing this physical weight and maybe I'm losing this spiritual weight. So now I'm finally able to see with my true eyes. And then things started happening more and more. I would sense the energies of people. I would perceive people's auras. I wouldn't see the color right away. I would feel their color. I would know what the color is in their mind. And I could sense people if they're being disingenuous or lying or malevolent. I'd feel it in my solar plexus. I'd feel like a punch in the gut. And the reason I thought, man, that might be indigestion or something. But it happened so many times that when I was in front of people, this barometer would go off saying, alert, alert, this person is no good. And then when I'd walk away from them, the feeling subsides. So I almost had this alarm system happening in my body.
And let me guess, you probably couldn't tell just by looking at that person that they were no good. You might have had people who were very hot, like high society people, and you could have had people who were just off the street.
Off the street, it was happening, not only people off the street, but even if I spoke to someone online or through X or Twitter, and their voices, just their energetic bodies, I could feel it, get very sensitive. Then one day I had another crazy experience. I was sitting just like I am, the curtains are down, it's a weekday, I was not feeling so well, so I was taking off work. And I put the TV on and I'm watching TV, and then all of a sudden my hands start burning, and I look at my fingers and I'm like, again, I'm seeing stuff. I'm like, what am I seeing? And I could see literally orange energy emanating from my fingers going towards the TV screen. And I was like, I'm losing my mind. I'm a rational guy, so I was trying to rationalize every experience that I'm having. So I'm rubbing my eyes, I'm slapping myself. I'm like, there's no sunlight coming in, so there's no rays of the sun. My eyes are, 20/20 vision. And this happened literally for 5 minutes. All I did, close my hands, open my hands, and I can see the rays going towards the TV. Massive rays of orange energy. And then after that, synchronicity started in the sense that I started seeing things about, regression therapy. And I was like, maybe I should seek some answers about what this thing was that I saw as a child. So I went for a QHHT past life regression. Just picked some random person from the yellow pages or from online. And I said, okay, I'm going to go see this lady. Name's Jo. She lives maybe an hour away from me here in Melbourne. And I was curious. So I went to her and I said, have you had any experiences before? She goes, yeah, I've had a couple of people that have had experiences with, UFOs and aliens, but not as crazy as my experience when it actually started. So almost immediately before the session, my hand started vibrating like crazy. And when I was looking at her face started physically changing. And I'm like, why is your face changing? She goes, it's not physically changing. You're seeing the energetic body coming out. And she says, a lot of people have that experience. And I said, I'm going through a Kundalini awakening. And she goes, yeah, that's what's happening to you right now. She had 2 cats. The cats were going crazy around the regression bed. They were coming up to me. They were purring. They were looking up. And I'm like, there's definitely someone there. Obviously, they can sense, this thing. So then I get into the regression and all hell breaks loose. Stuff that I had never in my life even thought of or heard of. All this information came pouring in. So I see myself floating over a planet that has purple skies. And I am basically just a golden orb floating over purple skies. And I go over a crystalline pyramid, a see-through pyramid, and I go through that pyramid. When I'm going through that pyramid as this orb, I see other energy bodies going above, leaving the pyramid. When I'm down into this pyramid and I'm looking outwards, a word forms called Lyra, Lyra. And I'm saying this out to her, Lyra, Lyra. And I'm like, what the hell is Lyra? Beyond the word Lyra, 2 eyes form. They look like gray alien eyes, but they're very elongated. They're not almond shaped. They're very elongated. And they're very detailed. The colors of the eyes are pink and purple swirls. So imagine oil on water, reflecting off water. That's what it was looking like. And then a face forms. It's like a female face. So it's like a kind of a gray hybrid. And this being was saying, I'm your Lyran mother. You were born in the Lyran constellation. This is your soul origin. You're seeing the birth of your soul. So that's the memory of the start of this soul journey. As soon as that happens, the vision shuts off, goes black, and my hands start burning. I lift my hands up, and my eyes are closed, but I can see my hands as human hands. And then all of a sudden, my hands start burning, and I'm compelled to twist them this way. And as soon as I twist them this way, they turn green with massive claws. And I'm hyperventilating. I'm like, I don't know what's going on. When I was growing up, I used to have this nightmare that I used to see of a wooden door with 2 flames, and I would never go through that door. This door turns up with those green reptilian hands. And with that reptilian hand, I push the door open. When I push the door open is when I have the most traumatic memory of the whole experience. Every time I speak about this, I kind of get choked because it's just graphic. I walk into a room and I see beings that look like me, these lizard beings, reptilian beings, really tall, 8, 9, 10 feet tall. And they're having a feeding session. So they're feeding on other life forms and they're also feeding on humans. So then I join in on the session and I'm feeding on humans, I'm feeding on other beings. And I can see everything in graphic detail that's going on. And I'm saying this to the therapist, that this is what I'm going through, and I'm hyperventilating when I'm seeing so much detail. Then the therapist says, who are you? Where are you from? And my voice drops. And I say, I'm from Alpha Draconis. My name is Ruck, the reptilian. Ruck, I say. And then the therapist pushes me for more information, says, okay, so who are you? Where are you from? What are you doing here? And I basically say that this is the past life for the soul. And then the next memory I have is me being on a spaceship as this reptilian being. And I can see it as if I'm looking at myself. I have bloodied claws. I have one claw against the wall of the craft looking out at the stars. And that's when I realized as a reptilian being that I started developing a soul. And I feel the soul in my reptilian body. And I started having memories of the creatures that I was eating, the Lyran being that I was, humans that I've eaten, other creatures. And I started developing, and it's like almost like a cliche that you become what you eat. So the next memory that I have is feeling an intense pressure in my temples. The entire room goes dark. I open my eyes and I see I'm lying down on a table in a room with purple lights, and I'm being pushed on some kind of a bed. And this is me in my reptilian form. And when I tilt my head back, I see what we describe as a short gray alien with its palms on my temples. doing something, and I can feel the pressure while this is happening when I'm speaking about it. And then I'm really traumatized. So the regression therapist says, push yourself, see what you can see. So then I actually open my eyes so I can see my vision, and I can see my reptilian feet with the claws being held down by these two hands on either side. And then I look up and I see these 8-9 foot tall grays holding down my legs. And then when I look beyond my crotch, I see a tall lizard-like being, a draconian being in a black cape, standing kind of sideways, not face forward, and laughing at whatever is going on. And then behind him, I see another being who's even taller, almost like an insect, what now I describe as a mantid being. This being was almost like a stick figure, but very detailed. It had like a purple cape. And it was playing around on these computer screens. And it reached out its claw or something, pressed a button, and my body started convulsing. I could see this golden light being pulled out of my chest and being put into a glass jar. And I've spoken to so many other people about this experience. It's like a soul scalping, where they take the soul out and they do whatever they want with it. So they then dispose off the reptilian body. But then I asked my higher self, what did I just go through? And my higher self says that you lived your life as a Lyran being. You didn't reincarnate. So first I thought I reincarnated as a reptilian, but I didn't reincarnate as a reptilian. The Lyran being that I was eaten by this reptilian. So it absorbed its soul. That's how I was able to live that reptilian life, to see through the reptilian eyes. And basically, what my higher self was telling me was that reptilians don't actually have a soul. Neither do the Greys. But they're obsessed with the soul. They want to try and manipulate it, but they can't. They can only manipulate genetics, physical, biological genetics. But they're obsessed with manipulating the soul, and they can't. And they see it as a disease. So if one reptilian starts developing a soul, it goes around to all of them. And they can't have that because that's their agenda. Their agenda is domination. So I see the soul scalping procedure. I'm crying through this process when I'm seeing all this. And then the regression shifts, and I start saying that, as reptilians, we're embedded in your society through media, through Hollywood. And I started spouting about a movie called Jupiter Ascending. I said, you need to watch Jupiter Ascending. That shows the true agenda, which is the off-world elite humans. And I know this sounds cliched, but it's almost like this being was telling me that the truth is out there, but most people don't see it. So it showed adrenochroming of humans. It showed how the planet is used to harvest souls and humans for whatever purposes they require. They show Greys in the movie. They show the Reptilians in the movie as draconians with big wings, but they play second fiddle to the off-world humans, the Anunnaki that are the human beings. And then I said at the end, towards the end of the regression, I said, I was threatening the regression therapist, saying, if you divulge this information that I'm giving you now, we will kill you. So I have it all on a 5-hour tape. So she was freaked out. Now, towards the end of the regression, she asked my higher self, why did I go through the Lyran life? Why did I go through the reptilian life? And now why am I incarnated as a human? And I said, is there good and evil in the world? So the higher self said, good and evil are human constructs, right? So when we eat animals, we don't know how they feel about us. It's the same way with these reptilian beings. This is just their genetic predisposition to be what they are. So we think of them as malevolent. So then I asked my higher self, is there good or is there evil in the world? And my higher self says, there is no good, there is no evil, there is or is not. Which to me meant, my interpretation of that was, we have a choice with whatever we do in this life, in any life. And then the higher self said, look, when your soul incarnated as a Lyran, you only knew good. You had not seen a malevolent race. You didn't know about malevolence. So you weren't grateful in your soul journey. So in order for you to be grateful in your soul journey, you went through the reptilian life. You saw the suffering that other beings go through. You saw that they are classified as malevolent, but they don't see themselves as malevolent. But you saw the yin and yang. And now when you're reincarnated as a human, you have that choice. That's why the human existence is so difficult, because you have a choice. So then I said, at the end of the regression, I choose the light. I refuse to have anything to do with these reptilian beings. I don't want to deal with them. And then right after that regression, the therapist was freaked out. And I said, oh, wow, like all this stuff is coming into my mind. I'm going to write it down. And then she said, look, you're going to have a physical reaction to all this coming out. I didn't really believe what she said. But then I said, look, can we do another regression? Because I never knew any of this stuff and it all just came out. And then she goes, oh, we may do one in a year, which was kind of like a polite way of saying thanks, but no thanks. This was too intense for her. So I go home, and when I go home, immediately I have a physical reaction, like an allergic reaction. My eyes get red. I start sneezing, almost feel like puking. I get in a fever state for a couple of days. And then what I would call a reptilian attachment started. So I'd close my eyes and I would hear their voices. I would see the eyes of the reptilian beings in detail, like looking back at me. Then one day it got too much. It was a weekend and I felt dizzy. I was sitting on the sofa. My wife's making pancakes and this voice came in my saying, Draconis, remember who you are. And I was like, I don't want to remember. This is not me. And the voice got louder and kept saying, Draconis, remember who you are. And then my hands started shaking and I told my wife, get me a notepad. So I got the notepad and I started drawing, closed my eyes, opened my eyes, and I drew the reptilian eye in detail, which I sent to you. I draw the reptilian eye and I'm looking at it in shock and I'm like, wow, this is insane. So then I flip the page over and then I start drawing another eye. I close my eye and now I start seeing a face. So I draw one eye, then my hand moves to the left, I draw another eye, and then my hand is just, it's like it's taken over. I start drawing the being and I drew the self-portrait of who I used to be as this reptilian being. The face, incredible detail, the eyes, the ridges on the head, the scales, the fangs. Flipped the page over, started doing automatic writing that looks like chicken scratch, but it's almost like an alien language. And I couldn't stop. I was just going crazy. So then after that happened, I was like, you know what, this is really, really bad. It's like I've opened a can of worms and some things now come into my life as an entity attachment. I need to find a way to get rid of this stuff. So I started meditating. Joe Dispenza's meditation started coming on my Facebook feed. And I was like, who the hell is this Joe Dispenza guy? So annoying, rewired guy. I was like, oh my God. So I said, okay, I'll give it a try. So I got one of his meditations where he starts with the meditation by saying, you become no one in nowhere, in no time, as nothing, as pure consciousness. So when you let go of your identity, you let go of your suffering, you just focus on being pure consciousness. And I would get into these meditative states. Now, when I was doing the meditation outside here on my balcony, I live very close to the city. I live next to the airport, but very important, the flight path is not over my house. I can see the planes going left to right from my vision, but not over my house. That's an important thing. So I started doing these meditations outside on the balcony and I started feeling really nice on the inside. And then after the meditation, I would be drawn to look up at Orion's belt, the constellation. It would just show up and I was like, wow, this is really beautiful. I'd look up at it. And then sometimes I'd see like these little stars flying by. I was like, maybe it's a satellite. So I got a satellite tracker and put it up and I'm like, that's not a satellite. And then every time I put my phone out, they would disappear, these light beams. And then they started flashing me. So I would go outside and even before I start the meditation, I'd look up and something just flashes, like a flasher. I was like, what the hell was that? So then one day I did my meditation and I said, maybe these are the same beings that I saw when I was a child, the two golden orbs. So I did that thought experiment again. I said, if it's you, please allow me to film you. And bang, the one turns up and goes diagonally across the 3 stars of Orion's belt. And I have all these videos. I've got hundreds of videos and photographs. So this thing goes and I'm pulling out my phone and my hand's shaking. I'm like, wow. And I was overwhelmed. I was like, thank you. You heard me and you're allowing me to film you. I didn't know what to think of it. And then the next few days later, I started seeing different colored orbs. I saw orange ones, I saw yellow ones. I started filming them, all just in that region. And I was trying to be rational about it. I'm like, who knows what it could be? I tell my wife, I'm like, I'm seeing stuff. She's like, it's just a satellite. You're just imagining things. And me being a rational guy, I really didn't think anything of it. But that's when the fun started.
All right, let's stop right there.
Yeah,
and
okay.
Let's cover that in the next episode. But
Sure.
Thank you very much, and we will definitely talk soon.
Thank you.
If you enjoyed today's video, please hit like and subscribe, and also hit the notification button so you can be notified whenever I post new content. Thank you. Now, if you're enjoying the channel and you want to support it, there are several things you can do. In fact, there are 5 things you can do. The first thing you can do is just buy my books. I got plenty of books out in the market right now, and I would prefer that folks buy a book rather than giving me direct support, because they get something out of it. They get a real tangible product. The second way you can support me is by becoming a member on YouTube or becoming a patron on Patreon. And just go to either site and it'll explain everything. The third way you can support the channel is by checking out my merch site, which is here. There's plenty of stuff that you can get to support the channel. And I'd appreciate that you have it and you can wear it. Not only do you help support the channel, but you also help promote the channel, and I appreciate that. The fourth way that you can support the channel, and this is really easy, is anytime you want to buy something on Amazon, literally just go to the description below and click on any link, literally any link. The channel gets a cut of that, and it costs you no extra money. You just go through the link, as I'm part of the Amazon Affiliates Club. The fifth and final way you can support the channel is through donations. Now, I don't prefer these because it's more of an expression of gratitude, but you don't really get anything out of it as a subscriber to the channel. However, if you decide to do these options, there's 2 options. There's Buy Me a Coffee, which is a separate site, and there's also, you can go through YouTube with either a super chat, super sticker, or a super thanks. Again, I prefer Buy Me a Coffee because that organization takes less money than Amazon does. But either way, I appreciate any support you are willing to give the channel. So thank you very much, and keep watching. I really appreciate it.